Welcome to the White Knuckle Web Show. Thanks for tuning in today to our wrap-up of the public land hunting series that we did here over the course of June and July. Today we're going to get as many people as we can in the same room and talk about public land hunting, and we're going to ask them all the questions that you've submitted to us over the course of the last couple of days. So shortly the guys are going to join me up here and we're going to get the show on the road. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm Scott Buckley from Iowa, hunt a lot of public land, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, wherever it takes me.
I'm Greg Clements. I'm originally from eastern Nebraska, live in southern Iowa now, and part of the hunting public. We just got off of our spring turkey tour. I'm looking forward to the whitetail tour this fall. It's going to be exciting. We're going to a bunch of different states, and I'll let Aaron talk about the states we're going to.
Oh yeah, we're going everywhere. We're going to try to hit them all. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Aaron Warburton with the Hunting Public, and yeah, I'm from Paris, America, down in Little Town, Missouri. About 800 people in it. And I just moved up to Iowa about 7-8 years ago and been here ever since. We pretty much just hunt public land and chase deer and turkeys around every day if we can.
I'm Dan Info, the guy sitting next to Aaron, or Southeast Wisconsin, hunt mostly public.
My name's Todd Pringnitz, White Knuckle Productions, born and raised in Michigan, grew up hunting there, and now I am fortunate enough to live here and hunt big Iowa whitetails.
Curtis Zabel from Wisconsin, hunt all public land. Yeah.
There's something to do with behind the bow too, huh?
Yeah, from behind the bow.
I'm Lucas Psycho from North Dakota, born and raised. I hunt about 90% public and throw in a little bit of private so I can relax a little bit. So that's it, man. This is one of those things, man. Like I like that, like you. I like the competition of like trying to outdo anybody else that's out there. That's I don't know. I think most people have that in them if you're serious about it, you know. And it's not something that they're necessarily gonna like constantly weigh yourself versus everybody, you know, and go like, well, he kills more and I must suck. It's just it's kind of like it's just fun. It's right. Fun to just. I'm a competitive guy out through sports and all that stuff, so I have that competitive side, and it's fun to just do the impossible almost, you know. So
You got 5 minutes for one more story?
One more, sure.
Okay, quick one. Memorable hunts. My daughter and my son's experience. My daughter's first, it'd be her second buck kill, the first one with a bow. I took her back into a public piece, same one where I killed across that river, and we got in there in the morning. It was her first buck kill. We got into this stand. I had a stand up there, but I took a second stand in for me to sit. And we got up. It was foggy that morning, just barely breaking light. And my dog, we're just sitting down. We're getting stuff out of our packs, getting organized. And this skinny little elm tree, you know, and it was a pinch point on a dike between two waterways. And she goes, "Dad, here comes a buck." And I said, "Oh, wow." I look, and here he comes through the fog, you know, coming right into us. And we were, you know, usually we like standing up, getting ready. And we were caught off guard. It was barely light. And that thing came in, I'd say 10 feet away, slammed on the brakes, looked up in the tree and spotted us both. And we're like, "Oh, no." And then some bucks were, you know, just immediately bolt, be gone. He was one of them bucks that kind of just did the side step, like he was going to try sneaking out of there. He was kind of backing up a little bit, unsure. And I mean, my daughter had only killed a couple deer in her life, and she was just on cue. She stood up when that deer kind of turned his head a little bit, stood up, and it was slowly backing off, and I grunted, and she put the pin on it, and 150-inch 10-point. She nailed it right through lungs. We watched it run probably 70 yards, and we watched it fall down. You talk about proud parent, you know, a big deer like that. It was just, and she was only 18 years old, 20 maybe. And then my son, he's killed a couple bucks. I wasn't with him, but the bear hunt we went on this spring, I was with him when he shot a bear up in Saskatchewan. I had already filled my tag, and this bear had come in 3 different times, big boar. And the first time he was pretty shook up, you know, the bear fever going on. Just, you know, he was waiting for it to stop and it'd move. And I told him, just take your time. And then the thing disappeared. And I said, well, maybe he'll come back. An hour later, he come back, couldn't get a shot again. The third time he came in, like probably 2 hours that first time, he came in 18 yards. It stopped. Cody pulled back and drilled him right through the lungs. We watched him kind of run around us. We seen him go up a hill, and then we heard the death moan. And yeah, it was a pretty exciting. Just watching my kids, you know, being with them on a couple of them hunts is just something that you never experience or out of body experience. I guess it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Curtis, this question comes from David Etheridge. After watching you kill an absolute giant a few years back coming out of a cattails, I have a public land spot that's filled with hard-to-reach cattails. My question is, how often do you think big bucks are bedded in those cattails? Should I hunt the edge of the cattails where deer could potentially walk the edge of the cattails into the hardwoods? What's your opinion?
I mean, I think the deer are always in the cattails because that's mainly where the people won't go. So, I mean, wherever there's no human pressure, that's where the deer are going to be. So, I mean, if there's a bunch of people running through the cattails or where the bedding is, where he thinks the bedding is, then obviously they probably won't be there. But, yeah, I mean, I hunt cattails early in the season. So, I mean, I hunt transition lines and usually just bedding areas, beds. But this guy can probably answer the question a little better.
The cattails are awesome. I mean, by my house is just all cattail marshes, and that's what we hunt. And you look at the public land, and Curtis can attest to this, the public land in that area of the state, everything that's dry, it looks like a pumpkin patch during gun season. And bow season ain't much better. But you go out in those cattails and you won't see anybody. And that's where the deer are. And there's no deer living to maturity in the pumpkin patch. They're living to maturity in those cattails. And it seems like the general public doesn't know they're in there. Because you don't see anybody trying to get them things. But that's where they're at. And to get into how he should kill them, how I'm doing it is the transition line of where the cattails meet the woods and finding where they're exiting. Or an island. Or some patch of trees that's in there. And that's usually where the bedding's around, because the bedding ain't going to be in water. There's got to be some sort of high ground in those cattails from the bed on. But to go a little further, you can go on old aerials, like on Google Earth, and go through the different ages of aerials, and zoom in, and you can see the trails, and you can see them spider to the bedding. You can actually pick the bedding off from home.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question comes from Ryan Helmer. I'm going to give it to Aaron. How do you set up on public when you know that there's going to be pheasant hunters or duck hunters or squirrel hunters, rabbit hunters, whatever the case, moving deer around? Do you set up closer to escape routes leading to thick cover? How do you go about doing that?
Escape routes, yes, but it all kind of depends on a number of different factors. Sometimes we have a lot of success hunting escape routes that are going from the public land bedding to private land. So, for example, we hunt a lot of duck marshes, and the duck marshes that we hunt, or the marshes that have duck hunting pressure on them, also have pheasant hunting pressure, like you mentioned. And that stuff is fairly predictable. I mean, obviously you're not going to walk into an oak ridge to go duck hunting. You're going to be down in the marsh. So you can start to predict which direction those deer are going to leave. Now the tricky part is when they're going to leave. that we've noticed, especially with mature bucks, I'm trying to think of an exact scenario that I could kind of explain this with. And was that last fall? It was last fall. We were hunting an escape route out of a bedding area that was leading out of a bedding area on public across the road over on a private. And the marsh is right next to that bedding area. I mean, within 75 yards of it is where these duck hunters are at, and they're down in there blasting away for about 3 hours that morning. And we only saw one deer that morning, and it was the mature buck that was in that bedding area. About an hour after daylight, I looked in there, and I saw a buck moving in this bedding area, and it's about an acre in size. He's probably the only one in there that morning. And he stayed in the safety of his bedding area until those duck hunters left. And about 11 a.m., after they'd been gone for about an hour, he came trickling out of there. He wasn't running out of there. That pressure wasn't pushing him in that fashion because it was predictable pressure. You know, he's used to people out there duck hunting, but he waited until that danger had completely left, and then he decided to leave. And when he left, he walked right under the stand. And I should have shot him.
You shot him, right?
No, I didn't shoot him because I thought he was a 2-year-old. And then I got back home and I realized he was a mature buck and that I should have shot him. One of many last year. But we won't get into that. They can definitely work to your advantage. Anytime you're hunting a public area, you have to predict where the pressure is going to come from, whether it's deer hunters or duck hunters, pheasants, whatever.
If I can elaborate on that a little bit, I don't see those big bucks move as much from pressure. I don't see the pheasant hunters move them or the small game hunters. For me, I see the younger bucks run around like that, but the big bucks know those bedding areas, and they're in spots in between the duck hunting and the pheasant hunting. And a lot of the marshes I hunt, really, where would they escape to? If they run across the street to run into the open stuff, the marshes are where they live.
Yeah.
But there's the in-between ground, the thick, nasty, wet stuff where your pheasant hunters don't go, your duck hunters don't go, your rabbit hunters don't go. That's where I'm killing the big bucks. It's the in-between stuff. It's marking off all that stuff where everybody else goes.
Yeah, and in this situation, it's a mature buck, but he's not running out of there, like I said. He stayed within that bedding area completely comfortable the entire time those hunters are in that marsh. He's used to that.
Yeah, he's already in his favorite.
Oh yeah, he's already there.
And where's he gonna go? Like Dan said,
he decided not to move until that pressure was gone.
right.
Okay, this is sort of a long one, but probably worth discussing, particularly from Todd to just about to the end of Greg. Todd through Greg. Any one of the four of you can take this after I try and read through it here. No one has discussed in detail much about weekend versus weekdays. A lot of focus has been spent on prioritizing family, work, hunting, and scouting time. There's a big advantage to hunting with a partner because you can both use one set of steps and split the load of gear going in. If all these podcasts and experts share the secrets and strategies of their hunting styles to the public land followers, the public land followers will know how to start to engage differently in their style. This leading to what many of these experts were capitalizing on will likely diminish. While one tries to share and help to educate others, does one not worry about the consequences of sharing too much information with the hunting world?
Yes, this is a question that we deal with often.
Yep.
And the issue here is that, and I hate to go too broad stroke too fast here, so you guys slow me down if I do. But overall, as a sport, we have declining numbers of whitetail hunters. And I understand if you come from an area that has a lot of hunting pressure and you're hunting public land and you're seeing people that watch us, for instance, that get out there and they're starting to have success or whatever. But really think big picture and where we're all going to be as a community in 30 years or 20 years. What we're trying to do, and hopefully it's going to turn out to be the right thing. And it's hard for us to say because we don't know what it's going to be like in 20 or 30 years. We're trying to educate people and inspire them to get out there and go hunting. You can figure out your own style. We're just showing you what we use. trials, tribulations, whatever. Because we screw up constantly. I mean, you may not want to hunt at all like us after you watch 10 or 15 of our videos. But that's mainly what we're trying to do, is just to show people that they have hope. If you want to start going deer hunting, there's a public area right down the road from your house, most likely, that you can go on. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the broad stroke of things anyway. So.
The sport of hunting is more important to my success. And I see an industry where kids are learning how to farm hunt when they don't have farms. They're learning how to manage giant properties for whitetails when they don't have giant properties. And you see them out hunting on public properties, sitting on the edges of fields and stuff. I want to see hunters have the success that I have. I want to see them advance, and I want to see them enjoy it, and I want to see hunting stay alive, and I want to keep the art of woodsmanship alive that's dying. And it really isn't about me being successful. I want everybody to be successful. It'll be a happier sport. I think we're a little greedy if we get into this to not help others.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I appreciated Luke's story about helping that guy who was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why
to me,
I
that's
do
what
it.
it's about.
Yeah, I enjoy that just as much as myself hunting, almost more now, getting out there and helping somebody else or showing somebody a different way. And the thing is what I think is it's, if something loses value, we see it disappear, right? As far as, it depends on the value though. I think we're getting more to where we're almost transitioning to a dollar value instead of a value of the memories, and the traditions that you create and all those moments that you have with your hunting partners or your friends and your family. I think that's the type of value we're trying to instill back, because you're going to get that when you start taking hunting to these levels. No matter what, you're going to get to that point eventually. It may take you 10, 15 years, whatever it is, but you'll get there, and then people are going to want to hunt with you. They're going to go, and that gives you that opportunity to pass it on, So that's what I'm noticing, and that's what I've been seeing over the years, is that, when people want to come and hunt with me, I welcome them with open arms. Yeah. Anybody, if you want to come hunting, I'll go hunting with you.
Sure.
So that's the way I look at it.
I think kind of the cool part about this forum in general, everybody getting together in today's day and age with podcasts and all the different web shows, there is something truly for everybody out there. And I think it's just made it a little bit easier to tell, the blue collar side of the story, which is what we all love about Dan, is like no BS, not pushing a bunch of gimmick products. It's hunting is pure blood. I mean, you're a pure-blooded killer. Let's face it. But I think 10 years ago it was a much different place. I think with the hunting shows that were on the market, it was the reason I started White Knuckle was there was nothing I could relate to. Right. None of these guys hunted like I hunted. It was all outfitter driven, product driven, and I just couldn't relate to it. So I think that we are all dictating the future of hunting. And I think just you guys all coming here today and all of us sitting down and talking about it, I think is a step in the right direction. Just educating people of the different options that are out there to watch or listen to the different shows, podcasts. That's the great thing about the United States of America and hunting in general, is that whether you hunt private land, farmland, public land in North Dakota to Michigan to Florida, there is something for everybody out there. We are very fortunate, all of us, to be able to have this ground. I mean, you go to Europe or any other place on Earth, and only the rich can hunt.
Africa,
Africa's the same thing.
You can't. There's no public going on over there where you can just walk out your door and go. And to address the gentleman's specific question, if you use this style of hunting that we kind of all dabble in, you're an adaptable hunter. We're not necessarily saying there's only this one good spot on public land, because, I'll tell you about the buck nest again. After we showed all that, people went in there. It's not the buck nest anymore. But guess what? Those bucks just moved to a different spot on that public area. You just have to learn where they're at. Mm-hmm. It's not like if everybody starts hunting like this that there won't be an out. Deer are going to adapt. They're going to change what they're doing, and you're going to be left to figure it out.
That's the fun of it, man. Figuring it out.
Amen.
Love it.
Yeah. This next question sort of is a good segue into that question. And the question is from Justin. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, but it says, do you guys drive a different vehicle to your hunting spot so that you can keep people from knowing where you're at, Dan. Knowing what you typically drive, you get a lot of people interested in you and following you around.
Did that person see my I brake for Coons car? Yeah. I have a separate vehicle for hunting because everybody in town knows who I am. I've also, and now the townspeople have one up on me, I've taken my truck that I used to have that had all the logos on it, that my kids bought for me, because I don't really do that. I don't paint stuff over my cars. But I would take that and park it at the main parking lot of the public where there's no deer, and I'd go in my I brake for Coons station wagon and go hunt the other side of the swamp and put all the pressure on the other side. So yeah.
I used to be that guy. I had all the NASCAR, it looked like a NASCAR vehicle with all the stickers, and then I slowly started to realize when people were like coming into restaurants saying, "Hey, is that your truck out there with the big lone wolf sticker?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not Andre." But the dude, you got to fly under the radar if you want to kill big deer on public land, period. Any land around here, even I have a bunch of neighbors who are all hunters. Everybody's
Huh? Well, of course we got to bring up the Smurf, the blue Ford
Smurfmobile.
I haven't
Really
seen
wanna-
this vehicle.
Yeah, we need to pass the hat afterwards and get Aaron a new car.
Yeah. What is it? What is it? The car?
It's an '04 Ford Focus that we bought from a salvage yard back in 2007.
Called the Blue Smurf.
Well, called the Smurf, yeah. And the thing is, like, it's worked perfectly to the extent of what we're talking about here. Like, people would have no clue that it was us.
I love it.
Except we show the stupid thing on every video now. And it's got, like, all these...
Sometimes you gotta climb out the window.
It's got all these unique vents and stuff in it.
I literally climbed through the trunk one time.
There's one window that still works, one lock that still works. I can't get my keys out of it. The driver's door got hit by a truck the other week. And yeah, I mean, it's, any day now it's going to be the end. But it's hauled a lot of dead deer and turkeys out in the trunk, so.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's see here. You guys can pick who wants to take care of Ethan Hargard's question. If you're hunting a large tract of timber, he hunts the Ozarks a lot. How do you begin picking apart where to start hunting? Do you use aerials and topos? How do you go about doing that? Whoever wants to take it.
The Ozarks?
Yeah.
Why don't you take it and talk about hill country, because that's probably what he's dealing with. I mean, it's what it sounds like to me. Yeah, you're talking about southern Missouri, where there's probably big timbered tracts, big wide open mature oak timber hills. Yeah, very similar to western Wisconsin, I would say.
Okay, so big, large tracts of timbered hills. What I would do is look at the topo of it first, or maybe a topo and an aerial. Like I like that hillmap.com. Mm-hmm. It gives you the comparison of the two on the same page. And I would mark all the leeward ridges. And when you get done doing that, you don't have much left, really. It's a pretty small area, and that's where I would scout and hunt. And you can get through that stuff pretty quick. Then when I got in there, I would be looking for the ridges that have the cover, that are still on that leeward stuff you marked.
Dan, real quick, what for anybody who doesn't know, what is your definition of a leeward ridge?
Downwind side.
Downwind
So
side.
wind blowing over the hill. Because bucks bed on those leeward ridges. So they bed when the wind's blowing over the top and the thermals are coming from the bottom. So I'd be marking the map to show where those leeward ridges are to myself. And then I'd go in and eliminate them based on thick cover or open cover and points or whatever. And then you really end up with a pretty small area of a large area pretty quick. And it makes it pretty easy.
Are you picking a prevailing wind?
It depends. I mean, I would probably mark it for several winds if I was doing it in advance. If I'm looking at it for that day, then I'm picking what wind it is.
I'd like to add on that too. Exactly what he said, and then I like to focus on areas that they either have on the topo maps, all the little lines on there. The closer together those lines are, the steeper those hills are going to be. So if you can I try to find the steepest stuff possible. That's gonna deteriorate some people from getting in there, but also if you can find a spot that you can only access it from one way, and there's like a big hill in between that, that's a good, because then you have to cross that huge hill to get there, and that's gonna, less human pressure, and then there's gonna be deer there.
Sure. This isn't a question, it's really just a statement pointed at you guys. And Justin Talbot says he doesn't really have a game-winning question, but he wanted to share how he really enjoyed the podcast series. He thought it was a great idea and a great way for you guys to share your knowledge. He doesn't think that you're giving away secrets. He says, I can have all the info in the world to go kill bucks on public land, but correct determination, sacrifice, and application is what most will lack. I, for one, appreciate all the work that you guys do, Justin says, and you do it for the love of the sport, and not only that, but you also generate videos to extend that passion even farther. Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
All right. The next question comes from Cody Courier, and I'm going to address Todd because it probably speaks a little bit more to what Todd hunts on a more consistent basis. How do you determine feeding areas that aren't obvious? In Maine, we don't exactly have sprawling fields of food or whatever, and some of the tracts of land that we hunt are small lots, 20 to 30 acres, sometimes at maximum 60 acres. He feels that it's extremely hard to identify food when the land in mind is all food, and I'm kind of referring to what you used to hunt in Michigan.
Even here, when we were talking earlier, early October hunting here is really tough because we have so many acorns. Generally, these hills are just packed with them, and they just don't need to go anywhere. And even this whole general area, there's great cover everywhere. There's generally food every 20 feet. I mean, they can just stand in one spot and browse. And the more you learn about whitetails, they are a browse animal. They prefer to eat a little bit of this and a little bit of that and keep moving. But it's tough. Different times of the year, some days you don't, some years you don't have any acorns at all, depending on what you're doing for food plots, grains, things like that. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just dive in with the tree stand on your back, go hang a set, hunt based on what you see, your observation, that dictates your next move. And I think as humans, we all want to plan for a cookie cutter approach so that we can do the same thing over and over, repeat it to achieve ultimate success consistently. Becoming a good whitetail hunter is about the opposite of consistent. You really have to be very adaptable and let the season dictate what you're going to do and how you're going to approach it. And I think sometimes the best thing you can do is just dive in, learn on the ground, your feet, boots on the ground, so to speak, and do the best you can and make changes, adapt to the situation, and keep moving until you're on them.
I think that when you look at those expanses of property without the fields and stuff, you got to get away from looking for the food sources because they can eat just about anything, and they do. I mean, I sat on a farm last year where I put in a food plot of really lush blend of clover, and watched buck after buck and deer after deer walk through that clover plot to eat buckthorn leaves, literally. So I mean, you don't always know what they're eating. None of us do at any given time. I mean, you can look at the browse and stuff, but that's really just a small indication of what's going on in the big picture. What you have to look for is you got to find that bedding and find a sign of those deer heading towards that food, especially where there isn't the expansive fields and stuff to look at for food sources.
And think outside the box a little bit. If you're watching a lot of Midwestern, hunting shows or whatever, that's what you're seeing: deer eating his food plots and ag crops. Like he just said, browse is number one. So, for example, we hunt a lot over, honey locust during the late season.
Oh, yeah.
When those pods drop, those deer will key in on those really close to their bedding area. That's just one of many examples of some kind of natural browse that they have to feed on. So if there's deer there already, there's food there.
Yeah, also water sources too. Like if there's not a lot of water in the area, that's huge. That's just like a food source, especially if it's you scouted the area, you got all the bedding, then you check that water source right next to where you're finding that bedding, that's a good.
If that's the limiting factor in there, then
Right.
yeah, that could be way more important than thinking about any type of food source.
Right, there's a spot last year where me and Skylar hunted in the hills, and it was up high, and there was a water source up high, and it was dry all the way up. I don't know what it was like water leaking out of the rocks or something, but it was up high, which is weird, which was where all the bedding was, and there was acorns dropping. There's acorns dropping everywhere, but I think the reason why they were there is because of the water. So.
All right, Robert Force. And he said this is for all you guys. What's the most ridiculous public land spot you've hunted? You know, the one where you would be almost embarrassed to have other people see you there.
I like it. Anywhere in Michigan.
We killed a really big buck we killed a really big buck a few years ago, 40 yards from the Smurf. Like the buck at the time of the shot was almost farther than the car. You know, not kidding. We actually, the day that we found the spot, we pulled up in the car and we're like, oh, we gotta take this creek and we gotta go over this hill, we gotta, hug this ditch, and we got this elaborate 2-mile access route to get in there. And Zach looks up, he's like, oh, there's a buck. And I step out of the car, and there's 3 shooters on a doe in the field right in front of us. We ended up hanging in a tree right next to us, to the car, and killing one of those bucks the next day. It's pretty stupid.
One of mine, and it was a deer that I took in the never-ending season. That was the year of, we had a massive flood, they call it a 100-year flood. I mean, it was unreal how much ground was covered with water. So I found these deer literally right next to the town I grew up in, right next to it. Train was literally, some of the spots I set up was literally, the train would go by and just shake you. And so one positive thing that train though, I've hunted along that train track system, is that covers up so much noise. When that thing goes by, or if they go by slow, and it comes at the right time, you can use that. So it's either whether you're sneaking in, you're sneaking into the train. I did that that evening. I wanted to creep by, access that tree stand. I waited for the train to come through, and the train come in, and I just pretty much beelined it to the tree. And so I was hunting a really small piece of timber, really small, like. Almost thought that the deer were probably watching me coming in there, and I set up, and if somebody was to look at me, I remember feeling that, and it's funny that question comes up, because I remember feeling like, I'm an idiot, but I was like, that big deer's over here somewhere, and then I had a crack at him in kind of a more silly spot. I was sitting close to the road. I mean, if you would have drove by, you could have threw a rock at me and hit me, but I actually thought that was the way to kill him, and I had him dead, but I had the camera out, and he stopped right behind a big tree branch. The little buck he was running with jumped the ditch, and it was like he was just waiting for him, because as soon as that big buck jumped the ditch and came right up next to him, he was like, all right, let's go, and they just hightailed it out of there. They just trotted out of the wide open ground where they were crossing. They don't spend much time in that wide open, they'll just run across it. And he ran away, and I thought, well, that sucked. I was like, he's right there. It was at like 5 steps. But a couple days later, I caught up with him.
I thought you were getting ready to say that I almost had him dead, but then the train hit him.
That would have been pretty depressing. Oh, gosh. But yeah, it was just a really retarded spot, I guess. Yeah.
I had one that this guy, this real old guy that used to work with me, kept coming in and telling me about this big H pointer he was seeing on the side of the road on a property that I hunted. And it was an area where it really wasn't very huntable. I mean, it was just brush and sumac and heavy grass. And there was really no place to get a stand or anything, and really not too many good hiking spots. And he kept saying, you ain't going to hunt that buck. He's there every morning. So finally I go over there to look around, and there was a bridge that crossed. And you could see these heavy tracks coming underneath, and there were huge tracks. So I'm like, maybe I got to take this guy seriously. So I got off the road probably 50 yards, and it's just open grass, and it's probably the only place where I can really tell where he'd walk, because there's no trail or nothing that you really see, you know, except for where he was going under this bridge. So you can't just sit there in the middle of an open field, so I dug a hole. So I sit in this hole, and when people walked down the road, I was too embarrassed to sit in a hole with a pole, so I ducked. Sure enough, that first night, this buck comes out, a nice 10-pointer, and I shoot it with my bow, and it was just before gun season, like right at the end there, and it's like, oh, that was cool, you know, so I feel, you know, pretty good about this guy giving me this info. So I get this field dressed, I get packed up, and I drive to the shop, and he's working, and I bring him in a 12-pack of beer, and I set it on the bench next to him, and he says, what's this for? Oh, I got that buck that you've been seeing every morning. And he goes, really? He goes, what time did you get it? I go, about 7 this morning. He goes, it comes by at 8. I go outside, and he goes, that's not the buck. I go, what do you mean it's not the buck? He goes, the buck was an 8-pointer. It's a wide 8-pointer. That's a tight 10. Oh, come on. And I'm thinking the guy's goofy, you know, he's old, you know. So I go about my business, and about halfway through gun season, you know, I got engaged, and I stop in the shop to tidy up some projects I was working on, and he says, when are you going to go shoot that 8-pointer? He's there every morning. I went back, got in the hole, shot that buck the next day. There was an 8-pointer.
All right, our next question, Scott, it'd be perfect for you. It's from Richard Buckley. He says, I'm from Michigan and was wondering what Midwest state you would recommend to go for big bucks.
First of all, that's my brother. Well, of course, Iowa first would be my choice, but he's been applying for points for, you know, it takes a few years, but I told him my first choice would be Nebraska. I think it's he went to Nebraska a few years ago, I think in 13. It was the year after EHD, and it just wiped out. I was out there that fall scouting and found dead deer everywhere. And they went out later on and hunted it, and you know, just there was deer dying everywhere. But I suggested he go back there, and I kind of asked him to ask that question because some of you guys got different ideas on it. But you know, he's been to Missouri a couple times, a lot of pressure in some of them public areas. I just like Nebraska. I mean, it's rural, there's low human populations. It's, you know, genetics are good. If you get in the right areas, I hunted in the sand hills, and that's where my brother went that time around Burwell. I black powder hunted mule deer out there one time, shot a 160-inch mule deer in that same area. But he's looked for a whitetail hunt, probably rut hunt. But yeah, that's what I'm familiar with. I've hunted Kansas. I love Kansas. He went to Kansas years ago. I told him check out that spot northern Kansas he went to. I think there's still a lot of good hunting in Kansas. Since
that's what I was going to. Kansas is.
Yeah.
Jared and Whitetail Adrenaline boys, they've been all over.
Yeah, that's where they go a lot, right? I shot a buck on public, a typical 12. That was the first big deer I shot coming from Michigan back in the mid '90s. I went on a trip to Kansas, down in Southwest, Fall River, Toronto public, down in that area, and just by studying aerial photos. Really back then we didn't have many aerial photos. It was more in the topographical. I just used to get all the topographical and study them right and left, and just picked out a little cluster of public lands where I didn't have to be committed to one. We went to like 3 different ones in that area. I went out turkey hunting that spring. I do that a lot when I used to go out of state more. Now I'm in Iowa. I kind of just stay here, but when I was in Michigan, I used to go to all these public areas or different states. But yeah, I would I go out turkey hunting in the spring, and that'd be my scouting for deer season. So I didn't just show up in an area, cold turkey. And I don't. That's kind of the extent of my hunting: Nebraska, Kansas. I mean, I hunted Ohio, of course, the big state of Michigan a lot, but. Ohio, I was mainly on private land, but
do you guys notice quite a bit of pressure on Iowa public? Because I'll be honest, I've never hunted it. I've always gotten permission by knocking on doors and getting to know people and things like that. But have you noticed an influx or a deflux, or where is typical Iowa public land at?
We noticed a fair amount of pressure. Yes, but we've hunted Nebraska public and Missouri public and some of these other states too. And I wouldn't necessarily say that there was more pressure. It's kind of it's different depending on the spot that you're at. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, there's some areas down home here in Iowa that we hunt that consistently year after year after year get hit really hard. But some of those are our best areas because of the pressure.
And it's mainly in the first week of November.
Yeah,
if you can come in the early season, some of them states you won't see a soul around.
Right.
You can, hunt any spot in public in Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of good answers to that question. I mean, Missouri does have the September 15th opener, which is nice. You can go and you can hunt for a couple weeks then and potentially kill a buck. If not, get a bunch of good intel to come back and hunt the first week during the rut. Kansas is good, Nebraska's also great, obviously.
But North Dakota, South Dakota,
South
Nebraska
Dakota just got an early opener.
all have September
really?
1st openers or slightly earlier in North Dakota.
Yeah.
And if I don't know, I wouldn't classify those as real big buck states. Probably not like Iowa or Kansas, but if you want to shoot a solid buck, like 130 to 150 type,
I was even going
those
to say
states are also
Ohio,
that.
would be good for public. There's all kinds of public in Ohio. Big deer.
Convenience and tag prices too, I don't know.
Yeah, that's always
like
an issue.
Ohio and Kentucky are they're a lot closer to Michigan,
Yeah.
than out west. And
What is anybody hunted public in Kentucky much or?
I'll be there September 1st.
Oh yeah.
But haven't hunted it. But we're going to go there because we've gotten so much positive feedback about it.
Yeah.
Kentucky and Tennessee, to be honest, and Southern Indiana, Southern Ohio. I mean, there's some good public land in Southern Illinois. Lots and lots of public land in Missouri. However, most people tend to focus on the northern half of the state. But there's opportunity all over the place.
You guys, just with the tag prices, because Iowa has fairly expensive non-resident tag prices, do you see a lot of non-residents hunting on public land?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where, and that was, I guess that's kind of where I was going before I went down the rabbit hole there. Every state has different type of pressure. In Iowa, it's non-resident archery pressure. Like that's the heavy thing. And that's why we tend to have a good amount of success seeing mature bucks on public land in October in Iowa is because there's nobody there. There's very few people there in October, but November 1, like you said, Scott, it's just an influx for 10 days and they're everywhere.
And even here, what I've noticed, all my neighbors, everybody loves that first week in November because you see the most activity. But that's my worst week to kill big bucks.
Yeah, we like second week.
Second week,
Yeah,
it's like
definitely.
the 15th.
I kill most of my deer after
the 15th, the
14th,
15th.
13th.
There's a couple other ones out
on.
here that are right around that time. So most guys burn through their vacation days, and that's when it starts to get good, is later in November. But dude, it's hard on your family if you've been hunting, all through October, late October. By the time you get into mid-November, you start getting closer to Thanksgiving. It becomes harder and harder to get in the field. But that's also part of why it's so good, is because there's just not as many people out hunting.
Yeah.
10th through the 24th.
Oh yeah.
Hunt that.
No, that's my favorite time period.
That's my
Last week of October.
I've killed 2-3 bucks on Veterans Day, big ones.
Yeah.
What's that? Usually the 9th or 11th or something. Yeah, I've killed them on that day. That's been my favorite day for killing stuff on Veterans Day. I've killed one after, one before, kind of right in that time period.
Oh yeah.
Cool, man.
That answers one of the questions farther down the list. We're getting close to running out of time here, so I'm going to limit this to just one person to answer this question, and I'm going to give it to Dan. If you could give yourself one piece of advice 10 years ago, what would it have been?
This should be good.
I just got asked that just recently.
I heard that.
I was listening to the podcast earlier.
My advice to myself would be to be easier on my kids and not push them into hunting so hard, and spend more time with my family than chasing down big bucks. I missed a lot of birthdays, a lot of important things, Halloweens with my kids, and I think my kid that was really into hunting, I just talked to him the other day, he has no desire to go back out there and do that. And when you ask him about hunting, the first thing out of his mouth is the hard hunts we did in the swamps where you had to carry the stand back 2 miles. And you gotta remember that those kids aren't you. You know, that your son isn't you. And he might hunt for a different reason. And if you think back to how you hunted when you were a kid, and how fun it was to have adventure and to figure out hunting, but yet as fathers, because we're so into it, we want our kids to be like us, and we push them into being little us. And we weren't that aggressive, and we weren't that hardcore when we were that age, but yet we're trying to force that on our kids. And I think sometimes we push our kids right out of hunting or get them sick of it real quick. That would be my advice to myself.
Yeah, that's a great point.
The next question comes from Tim Bueno.
Tim Bueno.
It's September and you wake up one morning to find out your state, amongst others, have elected to sell off all the public lands and close them immediately. Now what? He goes on to say, you see and hear a lot of it being talked about amongst Western hunters regarding our public lands. But as whitetail hunters in the areas that the whitetails live in, it seems like we are still taking these lands for granted. Maybe it's due in large part to the majority of whitetail hunters being landowners or lessees. Regardless, it's still possible and probably more likely that our states would sell off 1,000-acre chunks than we have grown to love. What do you guys have to say about that?
Just hope that you're in the real estate game.
We were actually having this conversation not long ago. I really would like to get DHA more involved, and not to say that they're not already, in the Midwest and out east, in these major whitetail states. A lot of what they're fighting out west right now is this federal land transfer to the states. Well, a lot of our land is already the states. It's already theirs. And I want to take it at some point one step further. This is big picture stuff way down the road. But that's kind of one of our missions, is to get more support for public lands for anything in every state that we have. Maybe at some point we will actually have the demand to increase the amount of public land we have. We're constantly talking about, like, we've got to save this, we've got to save this. Shoot higher than that. Look at a lot of these states. Look at Iowa, for instance. There's very little public land in Iowa. We happen to live really close to a lot of it. But overall, it's like 47th or way down. It's way down the list. Yeah, it's very, very low. I guess that's kind of the way that I feel about it anyway. You need to take it extremely seriously. If you're looking at your piece of public land and you have a little slice of heaven there where there's nobody at, and you're killing big bucks every year, yeah, that's nice. But can there be more people on it?
And not just for whitetails, but small game.
Yeah.
Waterfowl, if they're there.
Those
game.
And you all own it. Not just you. And we see that a lot with public, like people get bent out of shape sometimes when somebody comes into their spot or their area. You gotta remember, it's not yours, it's everybody's,
That hits home with me because I just recently lost a bunch of properties because our Governor Walker in Wisconsin, who I like, but he's selling public land properties, and he sold a few of the ones that, or he pushed the DNR and selling a few of the ones that I hunt. So it hurts. It stings. And I think what I would like to see is more of a unified group of hunters that fight this, because him and the rest of them are going to do what the voters want them to do. And right now, the voters are telling him they want to save money, they want to save the budget, and that's what he's doing. But if us bow hunters actually united and had a voice instead of all arguing amongst ourselves, it would be a lot better. And I think what the message we need to give him is we need a law that protects public property, that once public, always public. And I think it's a shame of some little old lady who thinks she's doing the country a favor, and instead of giving her family the property when she dies, she donates it to the state to be public land. She's rolling over her grave when they're selling that property.
Yeah, that's not right.
Right, it's not right.
And her family. you know, on top of it, yeah.
But if we could all, write our governors and tell them, once public, always public, let's shoot for that. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, more public support we have. Think about it, like big picture stuff. More public support that we have, to your point, the better our odds are at retaining those
Yeah.
long term.
It has to be a group effort.
Yeah.
Right.
I send messages like that, but I think one or two messages like that aren't going to do the trick.
No. Right. And Aaron alluded to BHA earlier. If nobody knows, or if you're not familiar with what that is, it's backcountry hunters and anglers. I believe they've got chapters in most of the states.
They do.
David and I were just a few weeks ago here at the Wisconsin Rendezvous. They've got, actually there's one up in Minnesota this weekend. But I've got a shirt for all of you guys from backcountry hunters and anglers, so they appreciate what we're doing as well. All right, last question. Each of you can answer it. Try not to keep us too late. When you think of the perfect day to hunt, the week, the month, the morning, night, whatever the case may be, what weather would it be?
Data hunt.
He goes on to say, what comes to mind for me is late season hunting, when no one else is in the woods, where almost everyone is thrown in the towel, it's bitter cold, the snow's too deep, and it's on the holidays, or just thereafter.
I'll give a real quick answer. And that quick answer is the best day to hunt is any day you can get out there. And yeah, there's disadvantages and there's advantages. For every disadvantage, there's an advantage. And there's something you can capitalize on. I kill deer when it's too hot by hunting water. I hunt deer when it's too cold because they move. Everybody's got an excuse, and it almost seems like people are looking for excuses. But if you're a good hunter, you should be able to take what you got and make it work.
Exactly.
Situational tactics. That's like you said, looking for an advantage every day that you have the opportunity to go hunting. If it's a windy day, maybe that enables you to sneak in on the ground into the bedding area where the buck lives, even if it's 90 degrees outside. Like you mentioned, you're going to have better movement on those cold days, or those days right after a cold front. But if you have a day to go, be looking for something that you can use to your advantage.
Some of our most consistent hunting last year, or where we consistently saw mature bucks, was around the end of the year. It was bitter cold and snow on the ground, and we were hunting that duck potato patch.
Yep.
We got the right weather there. I think it was January 1st when you shot your deer. We basically knew going into that hunt that we were probably going to see multiple mature bucks coming out to that. And it was the time of the year where basically most of the hunters were out of the field. It was bitterly cold. It sucked being out there. But we knew, and based on the scouting we'd done and the hunting we'd done in that area, we knew there was mature bucks, bedding close by, utilizing that food source. And then, we went in that night and saw at least two shooter bucks.
Yeah.
So that was our most consistent. That was probably the best hunting that we had.
That was
when we knew we
super
were
cold,
yeah.
waiting for super cold conditions to hunt a particular food source that wasn't exactly right next to bedding. So it just varies on the situation, I guess.
I kind of always gone with the way Dan looks at it, is there's always an opportunity. I always believe that. And I won't ever go hunting unless I believe I'm going to kill one. If I don't feel good about going out there, I'm not going, especially these days. I got 3 kids, and I'm glad he says that. Like we talked about, I wish we would spend more time, because a couple of years ago, somebody did mention that to me, because like I said, 20-year-old, 19-year-old me is complete opposite of who I am now. I hunt maybe 10%, maybe 10% of what I used to hunt back then. It's very limited now, but those hunts are always meaningful, as in why am I out there? If now there's always those ones where you're never sure about a deer. You're not sure of where a buck is all the time, right? But I might have a reason why I'm going to go sit this, like I described. There's a bend in a waterway or something where it's coming from the bed, and then they got to cross that bend. It's like a boomerang shape, and I'm going to sit in that corner of that boomerang shape just to scout, and I'm going to probably get eyes on a good deer there. It might be very last light, but I'm going to be able to locate that deer. Now I have the next few days or nights or mornings or whatever's going on. Now I know I have real purpose to be there, and so it kind of comes down to that, for myself. So
Personally, my favorite days are super duper windy days. Like almost
Yeah.
the windier the better. And when I was, before I knew, I don't know, before I hunted in Iowa long enough to really establish a consistent pattern, I hunted so many different pieces of property, so many different states. I just wasn't able to learn that much until I really, I guess, planted roots here. But that's what I've noticed is the windier the better. And if you get a period of rain in November that lasts more than 24 hours, when that rain stops, you better be in a tree.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's my secret. Windy days, I love them.
and that late season is always unmatched. I mean,
Yeah.
in my opinion, that unmatched.
Since you're talking about windy days, how windy is too windy? Have you ever seen sorry.
They can get a little cagey, but like you get over 25 miles an hour and it starts to get a little bit difficult. But I have consistently, I remember, I've been out and some days where I'm like, man, this is so windy, like this just can't be good, you know. But that's when you see them. I think a lot of it has to do with their nose. They're just able to. That wind is controlling that scent a little bit easier. There's nothing that I dread more than a dead calm day.
Right.
I just hate them. Dead calm, warm days just seem to be just the slowest. I just think they feel vulnerable. They just don't feel comfortable moving around too much because they just their nose becomes ineffective to a certain extent a little bit.
Could it be that wind is going to be consistent, you know, for them?
Oh,
so
I
they,
think
they
so.
know that when I'm going through here, I'm moving through this area, he's going to know exactly where that wind's coming from, and he feels a little safer in that regard, maybe.
I think just during the rut, you know, what is their goal? Their goal is to get laid. So when you got strong winds, they can cover territory and scent check deer that are hundreds and hundreds of yards. I don't know how far you truly believe they can scent, but I think for those pheromones, I think they can smell them from a mile if the conditions are right.
Sure.
And that's what they're meant to do. It's driven into them. So I think with those windy days, it just allows them to move, and they can have more bang for their buck, so to speak, and covering larger sections of property with their noses.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Interesting.
I have something
Scott?
real quick. Can I take?
Yeah, go ahead.
You hear people talking about lights, you know, their flashlights and stuff like that. I mean, because I was always that guy that was creeping through the dark. Always was.
Yeah.
And I started playing around with it and experimenting with deer coming around the tree and stuff. And I noticed they don't even pay attention to my light. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but I don't really think it matters. Like you always talk about those people that are sitting across the waterway and they see all these lights coming in and they almost make fun of them in a way. And I'm just like, I really don't think it matters, to be honest, but that's
I
my
used to be
opinion.
the guy making fun of them. I'm not anymore.
Right. Well, that was me too. I used to think that, you know, because I was walking in the dark and I'd be like, oh, the guy with the light, you know?
Years ago, Andre told me, and it's kind of something that always stuck in my. He's like, you can see an animal can see the shadows that your light casts.
Really?
So if you're just strobing your light through the middle of the timber, and he's like, you know, just keep it pointed at the ground. So that's my rule of thumb. I'd rather be quiet with a light than be noisy in the dark.
Perfect example.
And dude, I don't know how guys literally can sneak around the freaking woods in the dark because it's pitch black here in the mornings, you know, during the rut. And I'm going in early. But I always just carry a really small headlamp, and I'll even take it off and just carry it in my hand and just keep it pointed at the
Yeah,
ground.
watch your footing.
Yeah.
Don't pump your eyes out.
Dan doesn't believe in batteries, so he probably doesn't use flashlights.
I used to not use flashlights when I was younger.
Yeah.
I used to, it was almost like I don't know, a tough
Macho
guy
thing.
thing. I can make it 2 miles out in the swamp, get to the exact tree with no light,
Yep.
and I won't alert anything,
Yep.
and I'll be quiet. I've almost been shot like 3 times. I light up the forest when I go out there. And I'm still killing deer. I'm like a spotlight walking through the woods.
Yeah. Are you from Wisconsin, by chance?
Yeah, right. In Michigan was the same way, public land wise there, dude. There were opening morning of rifle season. It was like watching fireflies in an Iowa yard in the evenings.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh my.
We've noticed, and I mean, we believe pretty strongly in the lights. And we've got a lot of flack about it for the last few years because we show a lot of that on our videos and stuff, like hanging the stands in the dark, with lights going everywhere or whatever.
Right.
But if it's dark and not in gray light, like if it's pitch black dark, they just have especially bucks, they have a hard time seeing it. Like it's just, I can't tell you how many times we've walked up on a buck that was either by himself or with a doe or whatever, that is not even looking at us, and the light shines right at him, and then you just point it down and you listen for him to move off. And I mean, we've had deer close enough to touch almost in the dark.
Amazing how they know, like they know that it's dark and they're completely safe.
Yep, they do.
They'll let you get away with murder.
We have had multiple mature bucks come right in there and bed right next to the stand, within 20 yards of the stand, and that's the only way that we got out of there without spooking them was those lights, because we would have been way too loud without them. Like, we just shut them off and wait for an hour or so, and then kick them on and go right down as slow as we can, and you never hear them get up and leave.
Just Dan, and maybe Scott, where did that flashlight myth come from? Has it always just been folklore about deer can see lights?
I'm sure it's just human perception. People believe that if they can see something, the deer can. It's the same thing like, well, people walk all over the place and don't think they're alerting deer. Deer smell where you walk because they smell. It's people just think in human tense.
I don't know that they can or cannot see the light. They may be able to see it, but I know that it doesn't bother them for the most part.
I just in Michigan, I remember I was up in a tree stand, and it was just that last light, and just as I was getting my stuff packed up, here comes a deer. So it was pitch black by the time the deer actually got to my tree, but I had my flashlight, and it was like one of those tests where I shined it right on top of his head when he was below my stand, and he sure as heck, he saw his shadow on the ground right there, and it startled him. But as soon as I took it off of him, they couldn't see anything. It's not like the Predator where he can see the strobes.
Well, you just kind of think about it, and when have them deer been attacked by something shining a light?
Right.
They don't contribute it to human.
No. Unless you got an alien.
Well, I mean, in Wisconsin.
You use them too?
But
Back to weather. Am I supposed to answer this? Weather conditions. I'm kind of like that. Might play different. If it's hot, hunt the water sources. I'm a huge weather front person. Kind of before a front is pretty good. I try to be out there, but definitely after that front passes through, high pressure day, nice and sunny and bright that following morning. If you go through 2 days of heavy rain or a day, whatever, that following day after it passes through, when that high pressure settles in, it sometimes can be amazing. That's usually when I see, especially during the rut, that most intense action. Yeah, pretty much. I don't know, front some.
They're good.
What else I gonna say? Yeah, that's about it, I guess.
All right, we're gonna end the show with one last question that each of you can answer. If you could give a piece of advice at a very base level, what would it be to someone who's just starting out on their journey in public land hunting?
That me?
Yep. We'll start with Scott and we'll go right down the table.
Take it easy, take it slow, have fun. Don't expect to kill the biggest buck in the woods. Just get out there and enjoy yourself. Learn stuff as you go. Don't let other people. It's easy to get caught up on pressure to get you down, and don't let things frustrate you. Just keep an open mind and learn as you go. It isn't going to come. A lot of these younger generations, they want stuff to happen so quick, and especially me and Dan here, we we started out with nothing. I started hunting when I was just a kid, 12 years old. I've shot well over probably 120, 50 deer. And just enjoy yourself. Start out with nothing. Don't expect to get huge results right off the bat. Have fun, I guess.
My experience starting out public land hunting, it wasn't a question of if there was going to be anybody else hunting there. It was how many people were going to be hunting that land. So I would say don't be afraid to talk to people, get to know people. Mm-hmm. Don't see the other hunters as your enemies somehow, but talk to people, and you might find somebody like Lucas who can help you up that learning curve and hunt together. that would be probably my number one piece of advice. Because that's, I mean, like I said, like a story that I shared earlier about my first deer. I mean, some of the people that we've met hunting on public land have become some of our best buddies over the years.
I would say just focus on learning the woods over anything else. I mean, like Greg mentioned a while ago, blue jays fussing at a deer that's getting ready to come out of a bedding area or whatever. Like that's little stuff that you pick up on early on in your hunting career, quote unquote. Don't let that stuff slip by. Really, like pay attention to deer tracks and the direction that they're going, and coming from. Just very basic woodsmanship skills don't seem to be taught near as often anymore as they used to be. So just focus on that first and foremost, and you're going to find when you're young and you're starting to go out hunting and you're experimenting it with your buddies or your family or friends, you're going to have a blast doing that. When we were talking about our best stories and stuff a while ago, a lot of them are when we were younger. And I found myself at one time, in my early 20s, worried so much about killing a big buck that I was not having fun anymore. And then, we've sort of circled back to that now with all of our public land kind of social aspect type thing, getting together and hunting these places. And that's because of that reason. You want to just keep it fun, no matter what it is that you're doing. I mean, that's why you're out there.
Well, I'll echo that number one thing being have fun. If you're getting angry out there hunting because you didn't get your buck, or because it ain't working out, you're doing something wrong. Hunting's supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be something you enjoy. And it doesn't mean you have to hang something on the wall. But if I was going to give my number one piece of advice to hunters going out to trying to kill a big buck, it would be to get mobile. That if you're hunting the same stand over and over again, or rotating through 3 or 4 of them, those bucks are going to figure you out. Especially on, even on the private properties. I mean, you get off of the public and you look at Todd's. I mean, Todd, if you had 10 stands out here and you're only hunting on those stands and you didn't adapt when a buck made it to 5 years old, by the time he made it to 5, he's probably learned all those stands. So you got to constantly be adapting. So, and hunters got to do that too. That mobile thing is really more important than what you think. And the reason I'm stressing that is because every place you go for information on TV or anywhere, they're pushing sit on the side of a food plot thing and you get this information that you should be hunting the same spots over and over again. And I can guarantee you, all the guys you're looking at here, most of their really, really big bucks came for the first time they ever sat a spot.
Definitely. Yeah, pretty much.
That mobile thing, you could take a dart and throw it at a map and sit where that dart lands, and you'd do better than rotating through the same 5 stands every time you're out there.
Yep.
When I started killing and when I started really seeing deer is when I became portable in Michigan. Absolutely 100% portability is key. Like, you'll be amazed if you work a little bit each time you go out, what you'll see. I have 2 little points I'd like to make. One is setting realistic expectations. I grew up hunting in Michigan thinking that I was a bad hunter because I wasn't seeing pope and young animals and rack bucks. Back then, a deer barely made it over 1 year old. And it took a trip to Illinois within a week, getting permission to hunt, tracking down and killing the biggest deer I'd ever seen to realize, like, I'm just not hunting in the right spot for what I want to kill. So that's one thing. Don't set your sights so high that you're just going to fail right out of the gate. The other one is filming has become such a big thing, and I think most of us are filming our hunts, but I feel sorry for the younger guys who are just getting into hunting and they pick up a camera and want to record their experiences while they're learning how to hunt. I think in general, when I have children, I'm going to make them go hunt alone without a camera so they can learn how to hunt first. I think you can always pick up a camera, and I'm not going to discourage anybody if that's your passion and your dream, to film your hunts and stuff, but I think a lot of guys do it maybe a little bit earlier than they should have, and it puts so much more pressure, and you're just stacking the odds against you. It's really hard to do. So now I use filming as like one of my greatest avenues or elements of challenge. It is the ultimate challenge to self-film these big mature deer that most of my neighbors and people around here can't seem to kill, and I'm trying to do it on video. But that's the challenge I enjoy now. It's another elevation, or taking my hunting to a different level, I guess. But I would say that be a little bit cautious of getting crazy with cameras and tripods and camera arms up in trees. learning how to hunt's hard enough. Don't make it any harder on yourself than it has to be.
I would say try not to like mimic and copy someone down to a T and come up with your own ideas. Like, for example, I'm kind of like a real low offspring of Dan Infalt. I didn't start bed hunting and stuff until I found the hunting beast, and it was more, I found some sign, I'm gonna go hunt. But when I started talking to him and people on his forum, I started, actually paying attention to things like what you said, woodsmanship and all that, and how he hunts is a totally different animal than everyone else. So like, I pick little pieces from everyone, and I come up with my own ideas, and it's the same thing with like filming too. Like what Todd said, like a lot of people ask me, well, what kind of camera gear should I get and all this stuff. They want to do all this stuff. Like, you should just start out with like a cheaper camera, if you want to get into it, and see if you like it first, and then if you decide to like it, then up the equipment, learn the equipment first.
Yeah, these guys pretty much covered everything that I would want to say. I think if you could just surround yourself with people that are doing it well, if you can find some people that may just slip some tips to you or take you out and they'll kind of point you in a direction, surround yourself with somebody that may, like the old saying, surround yourself with success and success will come. It's one of those types of things. When you're out there, just constantly be asking why. When something happens, just try to ask why and kind of come to a conclusion. And that conclusion might come 6 years from that point before you ever really figure out why that happened. I've laid in bed sometimes and things just hit me from years ago that maybe because of that hunt that day, it just clicked and it was like, oh man, that is what's going on. That's why that place, those deer move that way. And just keeping it simple and just realize that when you're out there, whether it's public, private, anything, that all options are open at all the time. It don't matter what time of the year it is. If you gotta dig a hole, sit in a hole, dig a hole, you sit in a freaking hole. I've sat on a log like halfway into the water and sat on the stump side and leaned up against the stump, because there was that was the only way to hunt that trail that was up along the water's edge. There was no other way to do it, and I could have killed a really nice 3.5-year-old. It wasn't the buck I was after. That track tricked me, and that can happen. I thought it was a larger deer. It ended up not being a larger buck. Well, I move on. I learned that that's an option. That's just, one of those things. But most of all, have fun. Have fun. And don't try to put any, limits on yourself and what you got to do because this person's going to think that. Do what makes you happy out there, and you're going to be successful in the long run, especially.
Perfect. Well, hey, that one from White Knuckle to you guys. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's taken a little bit out of all of your schedules. We appreciate it, and I know our listeners do, and the viewers definitely are going to love this show. If you represent a show or you have a website or something that you'd like to tell our our viewers or our listeners about, go ahead and just do that. Greg, Aaron.
Yeah, you can check out The Hunting Public. We have a YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, Podbean for podcasts. What other podcasts? iTunes.
Stitcher, thehuntingpublic.com.
Yep, and the website, thehuntingpublic.com. Like we mentioned earlier, we're going to be starting in September on the Deer Tour. We're going to be going all across the U.S. hunting public land for whitetail. Well, not just whitetails, but mostly whitetails.
Yeah, mostly whitetails.
Figure out a name yet for your tour?
The Deer Tour,
The Deer
man.
Tour.
Yeah. I mean, we sat there and thought about it for a couple weeks, and it's like, just all that.
One question, you guys got room in the Smurf?
Always, man, always. We could put 2 kayaks on that thing. I think we can get you in there.
A little sidecar or something.
It's amazing how like-minded we all are. Every time you'd ask a question and I'd think of the answer, the person that would answer what I'm thinking. It seems like success comes from the same type of methods, For me, it's thehuntingbeast.com. I'm on Facebook, and I got a good YouTube channel. You gotta dig through it though, because I like to put possum chasing videos on there and stuff too. But there is some really good deer hunting content.
For me, Behind the Bow, Facebook, Instagram. We do have a YouTube channel that we have all our videos on, and our website is btbhunting.com.
And for me, I don't currently have anything as a platform set up, but it's all in the works, and it's gonna be just real simple, just regular guy, wild man stuff. Probably a lot like Dan over there. I grew up, watching him and stuff, so I steal a lot of his tactics, and I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, just be on the lookout. Hopefully by this winter, spring, I'll have some stuff coming up. So.
Nice. I'm just I don't have none of these shows or nothing. I'm just follow me at Scott Buckley, I guess. I'm just your average Joe, goes out there and hunts, I guess. But
Facebook page, right?
Yeah, I got a Facebook page. Follow me on that.
Yeah, Scott posts some really, really cool pictures of his family. And
Yeah. Keep it pretty simple.
He's a cool dude. I just want to thank you, the listener, for listening to this, and also Jason for setting this up. You worked really hard to get this podcast together, and I appreciate it very much. And I know
Thank you.
all these other guys, we all pick up little snippets of information and knowledge here and there, and it's just fun to be with a group of guys like this. And at this time and place where it doesn't matter what your sponsors are, or what kind of bow you shoot, or what broadheads, we're all here for the same reason. We love deer hunt, we love whitetails, and the chase, just like you do. So thank you very much for listening.